The Key to Health and Vitality by James Allen. There are today scores of distinct schools devoted to the healing of the body, a fact which shows the great prevalence of physical suffering, as the hundreds of religions devoted to the comforting of people's minds prove the universality of mental suffering. Each of these schools has its place insofar as it is able to relieve suffering, even where it does not eradicate the evil. For with all these schools of healing, the facts of disease and pain remain with us, just as sin and sorrow remain despite the many religions. Disease and pain, like sin and sorrow, are too deep-seated to be removed by palliatives. Our ailments have an ethical cause deeply rooted in the mind. I do not infer by this that physical conditions have no part in disease. They play an important part as instruments, as factors in the chain of causation. The microbe that carried the Black Death was the instrument of uncleanliness, and uncleanliness is primarily a moral disorder. Matter is visible mind, and that bodily conflict, which we call disease, has a causal affinity to that mental conflict, which is associated with sin. In our present human or self-conscious state, our mind is continually being disturbed by violently conflicting desires, and our body attacked by morbid elements. We are in a state of mental inharmony and bodily discomfort. Animals in their wild and primitive state are free from disease because they are free from inharmony. They are in accord with their surroundings, have no moral responsibility and no sense of sin, and are free from those violent disturbances of remorse, grief, disappointment, etc., which are so destructive of our harmony and happiness, and their bodies are not afflicted. As we ascend into the divine or cosmic conscious state, we leave behind and below us all these inner conflicts. We'll overcome sin and all sense of sin, and will dispel remorse and sorrow. Being thus restored to mental harmony, we will become restored to bodily harmony, to wholeness, health. The body is the image of the mind, and in it are traced the visible features of hidden thoughts. The outer obeys the inner, and the enlightened scientist of the future may be able to trace every bodily disorder to its ethical cause in the mentality. Mental harmony or moral wholeness makes for bodily health. I say makes for it will not produce it magically, as it were, as though one should swallow a bottle of medicine and then be whole and free. But if the mentality is becoming more poised and restful, if the moral stature is increasing, then a sure foundation of bodily wholeness is being laid. The forces are being conserved and are receiving a better direction and adjustment. And even if perfect health is not gained, the bodily derangement, whatever it be, will have lost its power to undermine the strengthened and uplifted mind. Those who suffer in body will not necessarily at once be cured when they begin to fashion their mind on moral and harmonious principles. Indeed, for a time, whilst the body is bringing to a crisis and throwing off the effects of former inharmonies, the morbid condition may appear to be intensified. As we do not gain perfect peace immediately, we enter upon the path of righteousness, but must, except in rare instances, pass through a painful period of adjustment. Neither do we, with the same rare exceptions, at once acquire perfect health. Time is required for bodily as well as mental readjustment. And even if health is not reached, it will be approached. If the mind be made robust, the bodily condition will take a secondary and subordinate place and will cease to have that primary importance which so many give to it. If a disorder is not cured, the mind can rise above it and refuse to be subdued by it. One can be happy, strong, and useful in spite of it. The statement so often made by health specialists that a useful and happy life is impossible without bodily health is disproved by the fact that numbers of people who have accomplished the greatest works, people of genius and superior talent in all departments, have been afflicted in their bodies. And today there are plenty of living witnesses to this fact. Sometimes the bodily affliction acts as a stimulus to mental activity and aids rather than hinders its work. To make a useful and happy life dependent upon health is to put matter before mind, is to subordinate spirit to body. People of robust minds do not dwell upon their bodily condition if it be in any way disordered. They ignore it and work on, live on, as though it were not. This ignoring of the body not only keeps the mind sane and strong, but it is the best resource for curing the body. If we cannot have a perfectly sound body, we can have a healthy mind. And a healthy mind is the best route to a sound body. Let us live happily then, not hating those who hate us. Among people who hate us, let us dwell free from hatred. Let us live happily then, free from ailments among the ailing. Among those who are ailing, let us dwell free from ailments. Let us live happily then, free from greed among the greedy. Among those who are greedy, let us dwell free from greed. Moral principles are the soundest foundations for health as well as for happiness. They are the true regulators of conduct, and they embrace every detail of life. When earnestly espoused and intelligently understood, they will compel us to reorganize our entire life down to the most apparently insignificant detail. Whilst definitely regulating one's diet, they will put an end to squeamishness, food fear, and foolish whims and groundless opinions as to the supposed harmfulness of foods. When sound moral health has eradicated self-indulgence and self-pity, all natural foods will be seen as they are, nourishers of the body and not its destroyers. Thus, a consideration of bodily conditions brings us inevitably back to the mind and to those moral virtues which fortify it with an invincible protection. The morally right are the bodily right. to be continually transposing the details of life from passing views and fancies without reference to fixed principles is to flounder in confusion. But to discipline details by moral principles is to see with enlightened vision all details in their proper place and order. For it is given to moral principle alone in their personal domain to perceive the moral order. In them alone resides the insight that penetrates to causes, and with them only is the power to at once command all details to their order and place, as the magnet draws and polarizes the filings of steel. Better even than curing the body is to rise above it, to be its master, and not to be tyrannized over by it, not to abuse it, not to pander to it, never to put its claims before virtue, to discipline and moderate its pleasures, and not to be overcome by its pains. In a word, to live in the poise and strength of the moral powers. This, better than bodily cure, is yet a safe way to cure, and it is a permanent source of mental vigor and spiritual repose.